Luck Rockhold's come out and he said, I'm not retiring. I'm returning to middleweight. I want to do it in 2020. By the way, I want Chris Weidman. And I think there's a lot of pieces around that call out. Okay. Rockhold has wanted to fight Weidman and vice versa ever since the first time they fought. And you have two nice guys who, by the way, really never had a whole lot of heat going into that fight. And even the winner of said fight is still mad at the loser. Loser's still mad at winner. Like, these two just can't get it right for whatever reason. Don't know, don't really care. Thought that fight was one of the more underrated fights of the year. When Fight of the Year candidates came out by the World MMA Awards that year, and that fight didn't win, it always surprised me. That fight was fire from start to finish, and because of the upset, it kind of just acted like it didn't happen. You go back and rewatch that fight, rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's very interesting. And Weidman was very open after that loss, right? There was always this talk around that loss that Luke had thrown this spinning wheel kick, and therefore, or I apologize, Weidman had thrown the spinning wheel kick, which therefore cost him position and therefore cost him the fight in his title. Weidman's never really agreed with that theory. Weidman's always been pretty cool to go, I was getting tired. Luke was putting a pressure on that I wasn't totally ready for. Luke was better than I thought he was. And that kick was really a Hail Mary pass where I was hoping to knock him out. I'm adding a few words to it. But this is really what Weidman has said. Now, you have to look at that and appreciate that, because if you're Team Weidman going into a rematch with Rockhold, you want to make sure that your guy understands what happened the first time. So when Weidman doesn't take the nice soft feathered nest that the world has prepared for him, that means he knows what happened. If he knows what happened, that is the absolute first step to being able to correct it, right, guys? It's like being an alcoholic. Your guy has to admit he has a problem. Step number one, he's got to admit, here's what the problem is. Okay, now I only bring that up because Weidman couldn't really get called out by Luke until Weidman got a victory. It was one of these things where Luke's going to look like a jerk. Luke's going to go, well, yeah, I'm calling out a guy who I've already beat, who, by the way, some other guys are beating. I'm going to go in there like the bully. That's not what that was. That's not what it's about. But Luke also didn't want it to look that way. And Luke and Weidman are very similar in that if you go follow their careers and you just look at the records, you are going to have a very deceptive opinion of these guys' abilities. I don't know if Weidman's ever lost a fight that was straight up. I swear to goodness, I mean, there has been a story to every loss that he has ever had, but Luke is largely the same way. I mean, even the night that Luke lost the title to Bisping, okay, did Bisping connect him? Was that fair and square? You bet it was. Has Luke ever fought that way in history with his hands down and his chin up? No. He was on a high. There was press clippings everywhere. Like any human being, you read them, and like any human being, you start to believe them. Plus, he was fighting Bisping, who he had already fought before. He just thought, I got this one figured out. He was wrong. He was wrong, but that's a big deal. And even if you look at the experiment at 205 pounds between both of these guys, I don't know if you were to go back over their careers, if you could say they did anything wrong. When they both moved to 205, there was a major opening for name and star power, of which was a bill they both fit. Both of them going to 205 were one win away from fighting John Jones for a world championship. That's the way it was. It wasn't the world's riskiest move. Now you still got to go out there and win those fights. Weidman runs into a guy named Dominic Reyes, who nobody knew was as good as it turns out Dominic is, and Rockhold runs into the Polish Hammer, who everybody knew. If you get hit by this guy, there's a reason they call the son of a bitch a hammer. And he ends up getting hit by the guy. So there's not really a lot lost there, and for me, that fight makes sense. I'm speaking purely as a fan to you. I've always wanted to see round 5 of that fight. I've always wanted to see 6, 7, and 8. I would still come into this with some question marks. If Weidman and Rockhold want to fight, my feeling is Rockhold and Weidman are going to fight. You now have Marvin Vettori coming after Weidman. That's the only thing that could disrupt this. Otherwise, let's just say that Weidman and Rockhold are going to fight. I mean, let's say it for fun. We're talking here. What's going to be different? And there could be a significant difference that we haven't yet been revealed. By example, let's say that's not a main event. Let's say that's a co-main event or lower. You're talking about something totally different. You're now talking about a 3-round atmosphere. That is a completely different fight in terms of your preparation and in terms of if you listen to what Weidman himself said, where he said, look, Luke brought a pace that was a little higher than I thought Luke was capable of bringing. Now I know. All of a sudden, you don't have to plan for that. All of a sudden, you're doing 3 rounds. It's just a different match. It's a different output. Something very similar happened as recently as this weekend. Benson Henderson rematches Michael Chandler. Well, those guys had already fought before, but when they fought, it was for the championship, so it was a 5-round atmosphere. This time they rematch. You got the same guys doing the same thing under the same rules in the same weight class. Why should there be something different? Well, because there was something different. It was now scheduled for 3 rounds. It changed the way that Benson fought. It changed the way that Chandler fought. Now, the result has nothing to do with my point. My point is I would be very, very curious, and I'd have my ears wide open to hear what is the placement on this card going to be. It's tough for me to imagine that you have 2 former world champions who are at the same weight class, who are in high demand, and who want to fight each other. It's very hard for me to imagine that we don't just all go, okay. All right, it sounds like our work. Right, imagine you're Sean Shelby. You look around the room, you go, hey, it looks like my job's been done for me. Sign here. So I think we're going to get that fight. But I think if we're going to have something to talk about leading into that fight, the placement on the card and the amount of rounds is going to be a very meaningful piece of this story.